going on as we have intelligence here right now. What's going on as far? It's an attack on humanity. That's what it is. It's an attack on humanity. And it's got to be stopped. Thank you.
All right, that was President-elect Donald Trump today talking about the attack in Berlin. Let's bring in our panel to talk about that and more. Steve Hayes, editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard. Julie Pace, White House correspondent for the Associated Press. Political reporter Jonathan Swan. And Charles Hurt, political columnist for the Washington Times. Good to see you all.
Good to see you.
Steve, I'll start with you. He has not minced words in any of his statements regarding this issue throughout the campaign and now in the wake of these attacks. But what does it mean going forward? What do you think it will mean as far as translating into policy? We're going to wipe these people off the map. How does that work?
That's a really big question. I think it's one of the real open questions of the Trump administration. He's made no secret of the fact that he rejects President Obama's sort of willingness or eagerness to wait a few days, even after we have information in some cases, to declare a terrorist attack to call radical Islamic terrorists. But what's unclear in talking to a lot of the people who are going to be advising Donald Trump about this is exactly how things are going to change on a day-to-day basis. I don't think anybody should doubt President Trump's resolve to solve the problem, to address the problem. We just don't know much about the specifics at this point.
And today down at Mar-a-Lago, he had some very important meetings on a number of issues, but there was a picture that they issued with a number of military leaders, top officials there who had met with him. We understand that he is getting plenty of briefings, although there's been a lot of controversy over that, Julie. But these real-world events kind of speed up the need for some focus.
They absolutely do. I mean, in about 4 weeks, these are going to be issues that he's not just expected to talk about, but he's expected to make policy decisions around. And he talked in the campaign about the rhetoric that he believes that the American president should use. Certainly that is an easy piece for him to address, but that doesn't actually solve the problem. And I think that he is going to have to really start to get more detailed. World leaders are going to be calling him when events happen in their country, wondering what the American response is going to be. And we assume he's discussing that in his private meetings, but none of those details are yet being revealed.
Maybe we'll find out on Twitter. Maybe that's how the world will find out. Listen, it gives him an immediacy and breaks through layers and filters that he's not been a fan of, and people have definitely attached to that, and it's worked in appealing to a lot of folks. Jonathan, Julie mentioned world leaders. Right now, of course, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, really in a tough place. Trump has been critical of her. How do you perceive their relationship proceeding?
This is one of the most interesting storylines that people should watch. Trump himself doesn't believe in the European Union as a project. Steve Bannon doesn't believe in the European Union as a project. Angela Merkel is a stunningly weak leader at the moment. She opened the borders, refugees and migrants, and she's also working with the European Union in Brussels that's issuing, literally dictating quotas of migrants for countries. And you're seeing Hungary, Viktor Orban, you're seeing Slovakia push back on this. We're watching as the Trumpism, arrives in Washington. You're watching the crumbling of the European project, and these two things happening over the Trump administration is going to be one of the most fascinating stories.
Yeah, how do you see this playing out, Charlie, as we watch a number of those European countries now have serious concerns and backlash within their own internal elections?
Yeah, well, I think Jonathan is exactly right. But one of the things that we do know about a lot of these attacks is they would have been prevented had policies been in place, such as what Donald Trump has talked about this extreme vetting from places where we know people want. There are some really terrible people who want to kill civilized people, who want to kill people who are Christians, who want to kill people who believe in freedom. I think that, and this is a big reason why he won the election, you get in a lot of trouble making that claim. He got into a lot of trouble making that claim and making that, suggesting that policy. And of course, all of us would like to pretend like we don't need such measures in place. We would like to not have borders. We'd like to have neighbors that are really nice and not trying to. But that's not the fact. The fact is that there are these people who are trying to kill civilized people, and putting measures in place to make sure that those people that come here for humanitarian purposes or whatever are are completely thoroughly vetted is a very important first step.
Did we hear Charlie say we would like not have borders? I mean,
well,
I'm going to start calling you open borders, Charlie.
He said if we had nice, good neighbors. There's a big caveat there. He said if we had nice, good neighbors.
Fairly. That's what he said.
That's what this is. Fair and balanced.
Well, let me actually build on Charlie's point, if I could, just for a second. There was an interesting report today on a website called Breaking Defense by James Kitfield, who's a well-known national security reporter, really one of the best ones. And it was a profile of Mike Flynn, the new national security advisor. And in this report that Kitfield had, he talked about the National Intelligence Council and an NIE, a National Intelligence Estimate that they were preparing in 2012, in which the U.S. intelligence community was prepared to declare by consensus that al-Qaeda was no longer a threat to the United States.
In 2012?
Think about where we are today and how wrong that calculation was. And they couldn't come to a consensus, in part because Mike Flynn, who's going to be the national security advisor, objected and said, no, wait a second, al-Qaeda has actually doubled its strength. I mean, he made strong arguments internally that kept that from happening. But the fact that you had so many people supporting, I think, the ideological outcome of what President Obama wanted, which was, in effect, to say, the war on terror is over because we say the war on terror is over. It's a reminder of just how wrong the Obama policy is, and I would say, to a certain extent, the intelligence assessments that supported that policy.
Well, and people, of course, will point to his JV statement about ISIS to back up that particular theory. I want to talk a little bit about this suspect because apparently he traveled into Italy in 2012, made it to Germany in July of 2015. He did eventually apply for asylum, apparently was not granted. He was going to be deported at one point. He was arrested, he was being held, but because of all the phony IDs and the inability to identify exactly who he was, Julie, they let him go.
One of the most, I think, troubling details that we've seen from German officials is that he had so many different identifications, so many different points of origin that he was claiming when he was dealing with officials there. And that is part of the complexity of this issue. Europe faces an even bigger challenge in the fact that you have so many countries who do essentially have open borders. You can travel so freely between countries. That's a different situation than we have here, but it gets to a similar issue, which is that you're not just talking about simple solutions. You can't just put up a wall at the border. You can't just say that you're going to deport people who are living here illegally, because you have people who, in some cases, do have multiple identities. In some cases, have managed to skirt the system, and that's where we need more information from Trump if he is going to be moving forward on these policies.
Well, asked today about his immigration policies or plans, he said something about, he said, what's happening is disgraceful. He says, you've known my plans all along. I have been proven to be right, 100% correct. Jonathan?
Well, Trump loves to say that. He said it about Anthony Weiner. He was, was very eager to dictate a statement about when the whole thing went down with Hoomer and Anthony Weiner, because he likes being predictive. But just to pick up on one of Julie's points, it's exactly right. And I was talking today to a senior source in the Republican foreign policy community on the Hill, and they were pointing out that Europeans have terrible surveillance because there's this culture of privacy there. So this is another complexity, and it's a long-running complexity in the relations there. So what's Trump going to do about that, and how's that debate going to play out? It's very hard to see how this is all going to wash out.
All right, panel, stick around. Up